Bonjour. Wabebeshe ki kwendish nekas makwando dem obeshe gokang ishenekade kaunjian. My name is Pat Ningewance Nadeau, Wabebeshe ki kwe in Ojibwe, and I'm of the Bear Clan. How many here Bear? One. Jerry Hill, our former president of ILI, was also Bear Clan, so he used to always call me his sister, and I was very happy about that. I'm very thankful to be here, to have made it from Canada, where I'm from. I'm from Lac Seul, Ontario, and I grew up speaking my language because everybody in my family could speak it, and I was very fortunate to do that. I have, I guess, an hour to talk, or close to an hour to talk, about the 50-year plan. And what I want to do, what I will do is I will talk about the 50-year plan as I envision it in 2073. I will be describing it in detail, some detail. And then afterwards, I will talk about how do we do that? How do we make that happen? And I will present two scenarios. One for where the language is very weak, and the other one where the language is still strong today. And how do we make that happen? Because different things have to happen. So that's what I will be talking about for the next hour. I'm very happy to be talking about this subject because I am very much an optimistic person. Whenever I am confronted with a fear or something, some difficulty, I look for things that will help me get over that difficulty. I think I must have learned that skill from being in residential school, boarding school, when I was 5 years old. Just 1 year, but it was enough to do some damage to me for the rest of my life, but I got over it. And from that experience, I learned to do things on my own. I used to be afraid of flying when I was 20. I would think that I was inside a big coffin every time I went into a plane, and that's because of the fear of flying. So I took flying lessons. And of course, you know, I fly everywhere now, happily, very happily. So that's what we have to do. You know, I found we have to do things. We're not trained to do things. We just do them because we know that we have to do them. And that's what this talk is going to be about. To save our languages, to keep them alive 50 years from now, so we're not lost. So I'm going to start off by talking very briefly about my background, why I came to talk about this subject. I've been talking about this 50-year plan for the past year in Canada, in Ontario, and Manitoba, and Minnesota. People like it. They like what I have to say because it gives us that vision of our languages 50 years from now, that they'll be living, that they'll be used. And 50 years is not very long because think about what you were doing 50 years ago. You were maybe 20, 10 years old, whatever. 50 years goes by really fast. So that's what's going to happen. Like I said, I grew up knowing my language, and I think I was 14 years old when I realized, when I was aware that I could express anything in my language, absolutely anything. I could talk about science, anything, absolutely anything in my language and not resort to English. 50 years of being in an English environment has eroded my language. I still know it. I still talk with people back home using, the full language, but I'm not as fluent as I was back then. So 50 years, your own language can get eroded, especially if your husband is not speaking the language with you. Okay, so the other thing I've done, besides knowing my own language, is I've been a language teacher for a long time, since I was 21, and I worked in television production, native language television production. In Canada, we had this program, very good program, called NNBAP, Northern Native Broadcast Access Program. And its purpose was to keep the languages alive. It was in the north of Canada, and my community is part of the north, even though we're not that far north. We were lucky to be included in that program. The Inuit people, the Eskimo people, they were able to do a lot of language programming in their language, and since then they've made a movie in their language, and I admire them so much. But the Cree, the Northern Cree, the Dene people, they did a lot of programming in their languages, and I think that program very much kept our languages alive a lot longer than they would have been. So working in TV production, it was very useful. I got to work with fellow fluent people, and we made products. We did a lot of versioning. That's replacing English voices with Ojibwe, my language. Did a lot of translation, interpreting. So that's been my career, and that's what I use today. Okay, so I'm going to talk about our languages 50 years from now. And I'm not saying this could be or this should be. I am saying it will be, okay? It will be, because we will do it. We will do it. I feel so strongly about it. We will do it. So in my area, I said that there would be two scenarios, but I'll get back to that later. But what I want to do right now is just to talk about what I envision for that time. And I envision these sanctuaries, native language sanctuaries. I say native language because I don't want to keep saying indigenous, such a long word. Native languages. And I envision these communities, sanctuaries, to be maybe 5,000 people living in each one. And in each community, only the native language is used. In every home, the people who are living there, they just talk in their language. That's going to be hard, just for me, thinking about it now, but maybe at that time it won't be hard. Richard was just saying that how pervasive English is. English is so strong. You have people that speak the language in a family will speak English to each other, even though we're not English people. English is so strong. You can make excuses like, oh, we don't have the vocabulary to use, or it's so much faster to speak in English. But no, I remember when I was 14, never having to resort to English in my home. I'll mention my grandmother very briefly. I mentioned her all the time in Canada. She lived with us, and she spoke English. She had learned English as a child, and it was very unusual for a woman of her age to speak English. Anyway, I asked her one day, Kukum, why do you speak only our language to us in our home, not English, because you can speak English? And she said to me, we're not English people. I've never forgotten that, we're not English people. What if it had been the Polish people that had colonized us? All of us in this room, including me, we would be talking Polish. And how ridiculous would that be? All of us talking, nothing against the Polish people, okay? But I'm just using them as an example of a language. But it's just as ridiculous for us to be talking English because we're not English people. You guys, I don't see any English long gowns. So that's what my grandmother said to me. We're not English people, and I've never forgotten that. So in my community, the sanctuary, everything will be done in the language. The stores will be the storekeepers, the staff, everybody will be operating in English. The language. Restaurants, the menus, bank, gas stations, the hospital will be done in English. Gee whiz, see how pervasive that is? The hospital will be run by doctors who speak in our language. Everything, the nurses, the staff. The university, the elementary school, the high schools, they'll all be done in Ojibwe or your language. Children will be learning. The courtroom will be done, we'll still be getting into trouble then. It'll all be done in our languages. The judge, the lawyers, casinos, bars, motels. But most importantly for me, in my view, is the universities. A person can attend university in his own language, his or her own language. That was my dream when I was 14. I wanted to be educated in my own language. I revered higher education. I wanted so badly to go to university, but I knew I would never in my lifetime go to a university where I'm taught in my own language. I'm hoping that my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, will have that opportunity, and they will, because I'm going to make sure that we do that. My grandson, he's 25, I taught him our language. His parents don't speak it, but I was able to pass on the language to him, and he speaks it fluently. We talk, we text, we joke around, we travel in the language. He's very fluent. He teaches at University of Minnesota now. He teaches Ojibwe courses there. He teaches online with other universities. So he's passing on the language to his own peer group. I'm very proud of him. His name is Andik Muldrew. So he'll be helping with this. And in my sanctuary, the one that my people will live in, there'll be a radio station, a TV station. TV will be on every home, and the language will be on all the time. There's one community right now in Ontario, where I come from, where the language is still strong, and their radio station broadcasts in the language all day long. It's so beautiful to hear. You get off the plane and you turn on the radio, and there's people talking in the language. They kind of use it strangely too. Sometimes they'll say, Josie, you better come home. Your kids need you, you know. But so then everybody knows that Judy's not looking after her kids. But it's community radio, and it's in the language. They don't speak English there. I haven't been there for a year, so I don't know if, I hope that's still the situation. And on the radio, we would also hear radio dramas, the news, world news even, because we would just listen to radio just like we do today. I want to mention that last year we did a radio drama in the language. I think we did 12 episodes, and each one was about 15 minutes long. Some were only 12 minutes long. I wrote the scripts, and all the actors are fluent people that we have. They, it was like Grey's Anatomy. You know, any of the hospital dramas that we hear, we see. There's romances, there's, you know, people in the hallway kissing and having these affairs. It's not a very serious, didn't get very much into serious things, just personal interactions, personal stories. It was a lot of fun working on it because the actors, they were able to read the script, and so all I had to do is just coach them and while they were being taped. So those things are still available. You could listen to them if you wanted to. They're very good to do. And in the sanctuary, of course, there'd be bookstores, library, where the books are available in a language. Beautiful books, they have to be very beautiful books, no cheap-looking books, because our books have to be full color, shiny covers. They have to look better than the other books that are in English. That's what I want to see. Education, like I mentioned, in the language all the way through to university. The professors would be learning and teaching in the language. So that means all the material that they're using to teach has to be translated. And services, all that has to be in the language. Okay, so that's what happens. And I said that there would be 2 scenarios. I want to talk about the first one where the language is still spoken. Okay, there are things that we need to do, 3 things. And one of them is to create fluent speakers today. If we don't have them in our communities, we have a lot of young people who don't speak their language. We have to work on them. We have to teach them. We have to make them into fluent speakers. If they're going to live in these communities 50 years from now, we have to make them now. Now is the time to do it. And the best way to do that, of course, is through immersion. I've been a university teacher for a long time, where I teach grammar and vocabulary, all that stuff that, you know, you study French, you study German, and you learn all this grammar. It doesn't make you into a fluent speaker. I took French for 5 years, like in high school. Go to France, I still have to talk with my fingers. So we need immersion to make fluent speakers out of our young people. Last spring, we did a 1-month immersion program in Manitoba. We had 11 students, And we had them live there for a whole month. They had heard no English during that time, absolutely no English. Just they ate breakfast, lunch, and supper, no English at all. They stayed there all night long and talked with each other. And so I took notes every day that I was teaching them. The first, I want to describe this because I think it's really important. The first 2 weeks, I taught them exchanges, like where are you going? Where are you? What are you doing? Things that our conversations are made out of, okay? And then you teach the possible answers. I'm going to the store, I'm going to the bank, anything. Where are you if we're talking or phoning each other? Where are you? Oh, I'm downtown. All these conversation pieces we learned, and they, learned them. And one way I reinforced the learning of these phrases was to play Go Fish. Do you know that game, Go Fish? They used to play it with your kids. It's described in this book here. I took notes from last year and how we did the lessons. So I made a book out of the lessons. So any Ojibwe, this is Ojibwe Immersion Handbook, but you might want to use some of the ideas from here to do immersion for adults if you already don't have one today. It worked very well. I was very happy about how it went. And I may talk a little bit more about how we did that. Besides immersion, besides Go Fish, we did a lot of role playing, a lot of drills. You have to have drills in order to keep drilling the words into your students. That's what remains for me when I go to France. All the drills that my French teacher did with us, those are the things that stick in your head, So I say use a lot of drills, use a lot of role playing where the students have to reach inside their heads and use whatever vocabulary they know to talk to each other, Maybe one person doesn't know very much, but if he talks with the person who knows a little bit more, then there's more conversation happening between them. So adult immersion worked very well because we did those things. We did them every day. Another very useful activity was to ask each other at the beginning of every day. In the language, we'd say, "What did you do yesterday?" So then everybody would ask each other in a row, in a circle. So they'd have to say, "Oh, I brushed my teeth, I got up, I ate breakfast," all the things that we do. And that's a very, very useful exercise because people have to anticipate what they're going to be asked, so they're ready. They know what they're going to say. So that's conversation, real conversation taking place among these adult learners. So I'm very happy that we were able to do that. Okay, so making fluent speakers, that's the first one. The next thing that needs to happen is we have to modernize our languages. 300 years ago, we didn't have can openers. We didn't have wall sockets. So today, we need to make those nouns and verbs, how to flush how do you say flush a toilet in your language? I didn't know until somebody in Minnesota taught me how to say that. So things like that, we need to modernize our languages. Otherwise, we use loanwords, English loanwords. Next thing you know, English is seeping into our conversations, and that's what we don't want. We want to be able to express everything in our languages, so we have to modernize them. And the way to do that would be to have gatherings of fluent speakers today, and different dialects even, and agree on what you're going to call microphone, anything that we have today. So, and then try to come up with one word that everybody will understand. We've done these in where I come from, those kinds of workshops, and we build our vocabulary that way by making these words that everybody in the group will be able to understand. The hardest one that we did last year was technological terms. How do you say Wi-Fi? All those words that I don't even understand in English. We worked on them. It was very hard, but we did it. So modernizing the language has to take place. The third thing is very important, and we need to do it now while we still have fluent speakers, and that is to make native language materials. We need to make films in our language. Short films, they could be 10 minutes long. You could do it with your camera, whatever. But the acting has to be in the language. And the scripts have to be written originally in the language, not translated from English. Because if you do it in English, you're only translating English thought. We don't want English thought. That belongs in England, okay? We want our own humor, our own situations on our reservations to be depicted in these stories between people, husband and wife, grandmothers, anybody. And there are elements of a good story that are everywhere. Our old stories are structured. There's usually a beginning. You have your characters introduced at the beginning, and then there's something that happens, and then the plot goes this way and that way, and then there's usually some sort of a tension or conflict. Every story has conflict, okay? Think about your legends. Each story has a conflict in it between a person's self, or between two people, or person and situation. There's always conflict. That is what makes a good story, makes it interesting, okay? You don't want to tell a story where everything happens nicely and then they peter off, You don't want that. Think about that when you watch TV, when you hear a story. There's usually something that happens, and then it gets resolved at the end. So those are, I mentioned this movie making back home, in my home territory. And then I said to the people, yeah, let's make movies. And somebody said, love stories, love scenes, torrid love scenes. So that would be fun. That would be lots of fun. The other thing, okay, so that's the first scenario. The second scenario would be, and this could probably be a lot of communities that we have, because our languages have been disappearing slowly, like Richard Little there was saying, where our languages are not great. A month ago I had to talk to a group where the language has been lost for 50 years. And it was sad, very sad, because nobody speaks the language there anymore. But I had to talk about how they can save their language. So I think in a situation like that, where there's no more speakers in that community, I think what you'll have to do is go to the nearest community where the language is still spoken, or where they still have fluent speakers, or something, related to your language group. So I think that's what we'll have to do, in those situations where you don't have any more of your own people speaking that language. You have to go to a neighboring community and get the supportive material from there. Adapt it to your own dialect if it's known, if there's record of how the language was spoken 100 years ago. Try to put together the language that was spoken in your community and create materials out of that. Create speakers through immersion by finding the neighboring fluent speakers to teach your group. So that will have to happen. For both groups, I think there are other things that need to happen. One of them is choosing an orthography, one orthography that all the speakers could use. One writing system. In 1996, I organized a conference in Toronto. I gathered the Ojibways from Saskatchewan to Quebec, from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and of course, in my area, Manitoba and Ontario. So we had 200 people who were invited, especially invited. They had to represent equally the regions. So not one dialect dominated everybody else. We chose very equally from all the regions. And they were put into groups of, let's say, 20. We had facilitators who were trained to work with each group. Talk about what orthography's spelling system were they using, and how is it working or not working. So that was at the end of 3 days. We were supposed to choose one. Of course, that would never happen. What we did do was end up recognizing that the double vowel system, so-called double vowel system, is the one that everybody seems to use. The universities are all using it and making materials out of it. So we chose that one. We just recognized, okay, that's the one that's most widely used. So choosing a writing system, an orthography, will be one thing that'll have to happen. You don't want, And then the second thing that will then happen is you publish in that orthography. You publish materials, teaching materials, novels, whatever. I haven't written a novel yet. I'm working on it. But we need to have these materials using that spelling system. Because if you use that spelling system, you're promoting that system. And so that's good for the whole group. And the books that you make, they all have to be beautiful. They can't be cheap looking, spiral binding. We've had books like that for the last 50 years. What it tells us when you see a cheaply made book is that it tells us that our languages are not as good as the English language books. My first book that I wrote in Ojibwe, it was spiral binding. It was a non-glossy cover. And I think, I know, that that's what I believed in. back there at the back of my mind that my language wasn't as good as English, you know. That therefore I had to make it look not good. And I slowly have been changing that attitude, making sure that I put money into making books that are that have now have color inside, and that there's good design, nice, beautiful covers, shiny. They have to look as good as the other books, or better. I think mine are better. Because our languages are worth it. They are very much worth it. And anything that we do, any products that we make, movies, whatever, they have to be top-notch. That's a part that I'm a little not quite there yet, because when I work with my own people, I don't want to act like a white person that's directing actors, you know, where you whip them, you know. I don't want to do that, because I was, you know, we were taught not to treat people like that. So I'm grappling with that. How do we get good acting out of our actors when they're never acted before? I'm very interested in talking to Navajos who versioned Star Wars here, near here. Has anybody seen it? Have you seen it? Is it good? Nice? I'll bet it is. So I would like to learn more about that experience. How difficult was it? Did the people translate the scripts into Navajo, and then the actors, did they read from the scripts, or did they ad-lib? Because a lot of times that will happen. People will ad-lib, not read from a script. Okay, so orthography, publishing. The other thing that has to happen for both groups is we have to document, big time. We have to document our languages today, starting today. We have to do teacher training. I heard somebody mention teacher training this morning. I was never taught to teach language. Never did I ever get 1 ounce of teacher training. I think my own training as a language teacher came from being a student of language, being in high school where I learned French, German, and Latin. You have to learn other languages to learn about language teaching. That's what I believe in. And the other thing too, you have to be a bit of a stand-up comic if you're going to teach. You can't stand there and be very serious. You have to have rapport with your students. You have to be able to read the classroom, you know, and work them. You get very good at that, you know, this rapport with the students. You know who to ask, you know who to have interact with that student. You're like a conductor, you know, and that's the chemistry that's in the classroom. And you can't teach that. You can't teach that in the classroom, you know, in a teacher training. You have to, the person has to have that gift. There's been times where I would lie awake at night trying to think of, okay, how am I going to teach adverbs, you know? How am I going to do that? I never learned how to teach adverbs. Do you know? Who knows here how to teach adverbs? It's hard. You could teach verbs, nouns, expressions, but adverbs, you have to kind of act it out, you know, I guess. So I'm still dealing with that. That's what keeps me awake at night. Oh, one night I came up with an idea, and I want to share this with you. I came across a game, okay? Children do this, but adults as well, adult immersion students. You play baseball outside, okay? You have two teams. So team one will be at the, out in the field, and the team B will be batting. So instead of using a bat and a ball, you use words. Okay? So the pitcher will present this image, this picture to the one batting. Maybe the word is fishing. So the one batting has to know the verb for he or she is fishing. If he doesn't know it, he's out. Next person comes on. It's a very good game. It's really good. It's good for kids. You get to be outside. Good for adults. We could even do it here if you had to do it, inside a big room. It's a very good game. And I just thought of it one night. So I want to share that with you. Use it in your community. It's very fun, and it works. Okay. Documentation, teacher training, repetitive drills, those are things that you need to do. Role playing, students asking each other what they're doing. Okay, that brings me to two more things to talk about. Okay, how do we do this? One thing that we're having trouble with back home, and I'm sure in every Native community here too, is we have this block in our throat. It was maybe placed there by being a residential school, boarding school, the experiences, the traumatic experiences that we had, where we were punished severely sometimes for speaking our language. All that has a culminating effect on how we view our languages. We won't say it, but we have this attitude that our languages are second class. They're not worth using every day, in our families. So that's why I didn't teach my son my language, even though I should have. My brothers and sisters, they never taught their kids either, even though we speak the language and we believe that our language is beautiful. But we don't pass it on. So today when I go home to my home community, anybody 40 and under doesn't speak the language anymore. They're left out in conversations. The older people be talking in the language. They're left out. They don't know what's being said, and it's very sad. It's very sad. So because in the language as Richard was saying this morning, the importance of keeping our language, it's so important because that's our spiritual connection to our Great Spirit. It's a gift from the Great Spirit. So if it's a gift from our Great Spirit, then language learning and language teaching is sacred, as a sacred activity. Must believe that. We must believe that. It's a sacred activity to teach the language, to learn it, It's identity for our young people. Then they know who they are. If they don't know their language, they're just a brown, white person. Connection with the community, that I just mentioned that. And then there's the emotional well-being. When you speak your own language, it makes you feel good inside. And so how are we going to deal with this block? In November, where I live in Manitoba, we're going to have a conference to deal with that very subject, to deal with that block. How do we overcome it? How do we, go past it? So this is going to happen in November 25. And again, we have to work with 7 languages because 7 languages are in my community, my province. And we got provincial funding. So we have to deal with Ojibwe, Cree, Inuit, Dene language, all the Dakota, all the languages that are spoken within our borders. The people will be only invited to represent those languages, and there will be a facilitator, a trained facilitator, to deal with each group. And each group will start with talking about why they've not passed on their language to their children, or why it's difficult for them to learn it in university, how the words get stuck here, how they're having trouble pronouncing these words. It's so, all the time, my students, they can't say the words. Whereas if you teach them French, they'll just learn that really quickly, but not their own language. So it's that thing that we have, emotional, psychological block about our own languages brought on by the traumas that we've had. So that's what we're going to do at that conference. We're going to have a medical doctor as a keynote the first day, and he's going to talk about the health that we get from learning our language and the opposite effect when we don't speak our language, how we act like we don't belong in our community anymore. There's criminals, people don't treat their wives very good anymore. Whole breakdown of the good values that we learned when we spoke our languages. So that's what we're going to do. One of the speakers that we're going to have is the Honorable Murray Sinclair, who was the chair of this TRC commission, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to look into what damage was done by the residential schools way back then. He traveled across the country with a group, and they interviewed people who went to these schools and shared their experiences. So he wrote a report about that, how the government created these schools and used the church to run those schools. I had the task, the honor, to translate that report. At the beginning of translating that, I shut my feelings off, like you did when you were 5 years old, because it was too hurtful. But after weeks of translating these stories, it really got drilled into me, the damage that was done to our people, how we don't speak the language anymore because of what happened to us back then. So I'm very optimistic that when we have this conference, something good will happen from it. You're supposed to laugh. Just kidding, just kidding. Don't laugh. I have a weird sense of humor sometimes. Okay, so I think that's about all I'm going to say. I've given you a lot of information, and I haven't used a PowerPoint because I don't believe in PowerPoint. I'm old school. What shall I do now? Oh, go ahead. I just want to end with, I thoroughly believe in this. I thoroughly believe in it. I think if we start today, the first decade, and keep doing more with each decade, we will save our languages 50 years from now. I believe it, and I want you to believe it too. Okay?